Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mystic in Training podcast with me, your host, Melissa Amos. I've been in not just the spiritual space, but in the world of business for quite some time now. And I've been working with business owners and entrepreneurs and healers and coaches and mentors and even with strategists and people from all through the spectrum of their business journeys. And something that's become very apparent to me is that when we start, it often becomes about, well, what is it that I don't know? I don't know what I don't know. And it's really common to go and seek and search for all of the gaps in what it is that we know. I have to say, I've learned a lot through my mentors and through my strategists and through business containers that I'm in. But when I look at everything as a whole, I realize that we seem to hit each of us a natural ceiling. And it can be quite tempting to just go and, okay, what's the new strategy here? What else do I need to do? Where else do I need to go with this? What is the next thing that I can do? How can I effort a little bit more? And then we end up working harder, often getting frustrated, not really moving the needle massively, or sometimes pendulum swinging the other way into something that's really not that helpful, but not really seeing necessarily many results. And whether this level is on income, whether it's on the amount of clients that come in, amount of people that show up in your workshops, pricing that you have, whether it is your capacity, we seem to hit a point where we can't go beyond, no matter what it is that we do. Now, I understand that this can be super frustrating. I've been there. I know it. I've lived it. And the thing that really began to move the needle for me went beyond what I knew how to do strategically. It went beyond what I had to control in my life. And it even went beyond effort. What really began to change the needle for me was around how I'm showing up, what's going on underneath the surface, what I believe to be true, what I believe my capabilities to be, what my inner world was sharing with me, and really how willing I was to do the big inner work so that the big outer work could really make a difference. Now, this is very different to when you need to go and release your money blocks, which has a place, and we've all done it, and it certainly works. I remember once being in a light language workshop, and it was all around money blocks, and I went in and I was really curious, and I was receiving this incredible energy, and literally 5 minutes later I sold my biggest package to that day, and I was like, okay, what's going on here? But it seemed to be a fluke. It seemed to not be repeatable. It's not like I did that and then people were throwing their money at me and clients were queuing up at the door. It was, I believe now, evidence from the universe that there's something in here and there's something within you that wants to be looked at in order to create this new reality that you're living in. And so I began to look at this in terms of the Akashic records. So not in a way of, okay, where do these blocks sit, but more with this curiosity of the story of what it is that's going on. And I started to realize that I had these desires and I had this motivation and I had this potential, if you like, that I could move into the next level of my visibility, of my career, of my income, and of my capacity, really. But there was all of this stuff sitting underneath it that was in opposition, if you like, to this reality that I wanted to create. There was feelings of not being safe in this. There was beliefs around, well, in order to earn more, I need to do more, and I don't want to do more. There were understandings in there about what it means to hold power. There were conversations that had happened around people who had grown too big for their boots. And all of these things and more were swimming around in my Akashic field. And they were influencing me, subtly or not so subtly, into what I allowed myself to do and what I believed was possible. And however good my strategy was, how I allowed myself to show up in that way, how much of me I brought into the strategies that I was doing, if you like. And so this came into the knowing of, well, maybe it's not that I have to do more. This came into the knowing of, well, I have what I need to undertake where it is that I want to go, but I don't have the coherence. I don't have all of the systems, if you like, running and singing the same tune. And if you've ever been somewhere where there's 20 different sound sources going on, you can understand that it doesn't matter how beautiful the piece is, and it even doesn't matter how loud one of them is. If all of these other sub frequencies and these different tunes of different genres are going on underneath it, it gets loud, it gets chaotic, and no one can enjoy anything. And all of this is happening underneath the surface. And when you're a business owner, when you're highly sensitive, when you are holding other people's stuff in your hands and in your sessions, all of that gets amplified. And that's the thing that no one teaches you in the strategy sessions. That's the thing that nobody teaches you in business school. That it's about who you are and how you're showing up and the whole story. Through your life and through your past life experiences, through your understanding of capacity of what's possible, and through the beliefs and the projections that we have within us that then tell us quite often opposing opinions. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because I started to realize that some of these conversations that were going around in my field, some of these beliefs that were installed in me, if you like, from when I was super young, these strategies and these programs and these conditions that had been either I'd put on myself for whatever reason because I thought that was the right thing to do with the information that I had back then, or through what society has conditioned us into, and through our life path and our life purposes and all of these things, that some of the aspects were rooted in some of these energies: fear, shame, despair, lack, anger, guilt, resentment. And those frequencies were like carrying a big bag of heavy rocks. And so I had these other frequencies running. I had evidence of what is possible, what it means to hold power with integrity, what potential my business and my creations could reach. I certainly had the desire and I certainly had the vision. But if you imagine that all of those are like big helium balloons and they're all sitting on my shoulders and they're lifting me up into this potential, it gets to a point that we know as our ceiling, where the things that we are carrying, those heavy emotions, those heavy frequencies of guilt, shame, doubt, fear, anger, are essentially weighing us down. And so it doesn't really matter how many more balloons we have. We're only ever going to lift up a certain way. And if we want to do that without doing anything with these weights, we are going to need a lot of balloons. And that is really high effort. This takes up a lot of our energy and of our time and our space. Now, what I've seen traditionally is then we go in and so we look at the money blocks. And it could have been, for example, when I was in that light language session, that one of my blocks was taken and it met the frequency and poof, it had gone beyond my understanding, but beyond what I needed to know consciously. It was there and then it was gone. And so it allowed me to lift a little higher, to let my balloon bump me up, and then it came back down and settled at a certain space. But if we really want to keep on lifting and keep on rising, if we really want to keep on with this growth and with this evolution, this isn't hierarchical. We can start to look at these balloons not as, well, how do I get more, but how do I lift my perspective? How do I become more of my true essence, which is freedom and joy and love, which is this level of, especially when we're in this work, which is this level of how I become more of me so that I can reach more people and essentially so more people can see me, right? How can we do that if we still have all of these weights that are holding us back? Now, this isn't about just cutting the strings, because then we're untethered, then we're ungrounded, then we're going off in a place of, like, who knows? This isn't my path, this isn't my strength. And I don't believe that all of these blocks that are sitting underneath are there to hold you back necessarily, but they're there as information. They're there as part of what it meant to be human. And so what happens is we create a very different way of working with them. We begin to understand that we have these different aspects. So we have these heavy blocks, which are filled with the experiences and the strategies and the conditions and the programs and the understandings, the stories that we've created from life. So we have that. We also have these balloons, which are the potential, the future, the things that are lifting us and are growing us and are helping us move into a higher perspective. And then we have the place that all of that sits in, our Akashic field. And within this place, we have what I call our divine blueprint. This knowing of all of this is part of who I am and who I've been. And part of my work this lifetime is to actualize more of me, my soul. And my route into that is through these blocks and these balloons that are giving me the territory, if you like, of the path that I'm walking. When we begin to look at this in this way, we can see how it's not just energetic, it's also psychological. We know in neurological terms that these are the neural pathways that have continually strengthened because they have been the habits and the strategies that we have been working with through our life. So they're strong and they're hard. But we also know that there's neuroplasticity and that we can move this. We can create new pathways. And these are the balloons that we are working towards. These are the new things, the new horizons that we get to see. And what I've discovered through Akashic Reiki is actually when we move into them, it's not so much what happened, but it's how we're holding those. And so when we're coming from this place of shame or fear or anger, when we have all of those stories running in our system, they're super heavy. And it's more about changing the frequency into awareness, first of all. Oh, look, I have these weights. This is why my balloon is not rising anymore. I wonder what's in them. To acceptance. Oh, so these came because they were trying to protect me. They were the best thing I had at the time. They've been part of my evolution and growth. And then perhaps even we can come into gratitude or love, which is a very high frequency, which then takes these rocks and turns them into, if you like, the original piece of paper that they were. And so they're still there, they're still tethered, they're still part of our lesson, they're still part of our evolution. But rather than being the thing that's weighing us down, they're the thing that come along with us. They're the thing that helps us know how we can help more. They're the thing that helps us have compassion and empathy, that helps us share the stories, not through woe me, but through this is who I was, and now look who I am. Which, as we rise, keeps us tethered to who we are, keeps us on our path and our journey. But now we don't have the ceiling. We don't have this thing that keeps on tugging at our attention and going, hey, come back, look at me. They're simply part of the journey that we once created. And our path becomes, how am I working through my divinity, through my path, through my potential, through the things that I am becoming, through my divine blueprint, and making my decisions from there, not from the block of shame or guilt, which won't go anywhere until we show it some understanding at least. That's psychology. That's energy. That's the Akashic field. When we begin to walk this path, we understand that our desires, the things that we want, the place that we want our balloons to take us to, the heights that we want to reach, are part of who we are as much as our old stories were. But the difference becomes in which part of me is guiding me, which part of me is allowing for the intentions to come in. Am I wanting to rise to fame so that I hold all of this power and this influence so that I can get what I want? And so people will finally listen to me, right? Which comes from that energy of fear or of shame or of guilt or of envy. Or am I wanting to rise because I understand that I have a potential, that I understand that there's a song that wants to be sung through me, and that the higher I rise, the more people can hear it, or the right people can hear it? Am I wanting to rise because I understand that my path is about growth and is about evolution, and that I am here to touch other people in a way that's going to help them and inspire them? Perhaps part of your journey is, if you're creating your work and your vocation is also your spirituality and your healing and your growth and your love and your purpose, and it all sits together, then maybe part of your growth is, well, let me see how I can earn good money while still being satisfied, while still being integral, whilst enjoying and being delighted about my work and what I do every day. Because why else would we have all of these things? We're made well, we're perfectly made. And the Akashic Way shows us this. But where it all gets skewed is when we're living our life through those blocks and they become our identity or they become our nemesis. The Akashic Way changes that. And when we move into this new way of understanding and we start to live by that every single day, it changes everything. because we become tethered down by our truth, our soul, our heart, not by our shame and our guilt and our fear. And we rise not through just a bunch of hot air, but through this integrity, through this potential. And we become lighter because we're not so weighed down. This is the new way of being. This is the Akashic way. This is how we rise in this new paradigm that we're all moving into. And for me personally, it's still a journey. For me, it's this continual remembrance that the version that I was, the person that I was, is not the same version of me that can hold what's coming next. Not because there was anything wrong with that original me, but because there's this continual path of growth. And I meet it not with anger, frustration, shame, or doubt. I meet it with curiosity and acceptance and love. And so my invitation for you, dear listener, is next time you feel yourself getting frustrated, next time you see yourself banging your head against this edge, against this invisible ceiling, just come back into yourself and ask yourself, how do I bring more of me in here? How do I bring my awareness here? Where can I find that awareness, that acceptance, and that gratitude? And maybe even that love. Start there, and you'll begin to see your balloons just lifting a little more.